Welcome everybody. Hope you're fine, doing well. This episode is about the VK3601H, a step in the Tiger tank development, the last one before we see the Tiger I, H1, V1. I would like to give you guys good information about the vehicle, Tiger tank tracks in particular this time, and bring this project up to date so we can finish it fitting somewhere in the newly announced schedule, a video every second week. You are watching Tank Brusher. I'm doing 1/35th scale German armor, trying to build more accurate vehicles from here on. Thank you very much for your subscription, and please join me on Instagram. I upload daily from here on. Special thank you to my Patreons for literally keeping the camera running. This is, by the way, where you find the STL files for this conversion as well. Now let's dive into it. When picking back up a project that was almost stalled for half a year, it's best to start with the things that got missed. Here on the rear plate of the vehicle, for example, almost every attachment point needs to go, including the bracket where the trailer would be attached, a towing bracket in the rear. I think when looking at Panzer Tracts number 6, I could swear there is a cutout behind the exhaust allowing a view into the motor compartment. Can't realize this now. But what I can do is place the missing breaker bar that was clearly present in some of the photographs. We have to live with the check because the texture of the fenders is not restorable if I want to remove it. The bar in the front connecting the fenders was reinstalled, and the cover for the fan angling up. There's something odd that was present on some of the photographs during demonstrations as well. Another thing to deal with are some outdated parts of the initial design. These window frames were quite a bit large, so I reworked these parts into a up-to-date standard. Me knowing my resin printer now much better and knowing the materials I work with leads to being more confident in designing smaller parts and not having to clean the printer all the time. Okay, the holder for the driver's window was installed, gluing it on one side, then adjusting it, gluing down the other side as well. On the original there was a lever for raising or lowering the windshield. I printed this part as well and attached it to the frame. The vehicle width indicator holders were too chunky in the original design. I replaced them with finer detailed one, and I'm kind of fascinating how well these long holes are printing. This is 0.3mm copper wire, and this went through and remained workable throughout the whole process. Okay, that was enough fixing, and aside from me having to realign the complete front section because I didn't seat the transmission fully, I had a lot of repair work to do here. This means I need a new base coat, redo the complete last step, and this time I wanted to go for a more distressed look. The technique is well explained by some other high profile channels. There is no reason to really dive deep into it. So far I like the Tamiya Panzer Gray best. Actually, it's not that blue, and being a little bit brighter than the original enables us still to see weathering done. The whole new base coat was applied over black. I use Mr. Leveling Thinner to thin the paint down, and paint brand is Tamiya, of course. There was no real reason to look for something different. The whole distressing base coat looks a little bit comic-y or overdone for now, but this is only the base coat. Now I create a tint with the Panzer Gray by adding white to it, and repeat the whole process, concentrating only on the center surfaces, leaving all borders in the original color and the black shine through on some spots only. It looks very cloudy from here. That's not a huge problem. You will see this turn out in a second. So far, one reason why I switched over to Tamiya paints and some more smelly thinner is these Hart and Steenbeck airbrushes are illustrator tools, not especially modeler tools, and they work much better with thinner paints. Okay, that's now a very uneven, cloudy and iffy looking paint job for a base coat, but that's fine. What I do now, and haven't got a clip of me doing it, is overspray it with what is basically a dirty thinner, just unifying the whole thing, filling some spaces, adding some paint where it's needed, so we have the distressed look, but still a more or less unified base coat. With this out of the way, it's time to break out the wet palette and some acrylic paints to get some initial weathering done. I would like to first paint the detail. This means rubber rims. I use Ammo by MIG rubber and tires for this. That's my favorite paint for using everything to use with everything that is rubbery, tires, tracks, whatever. Okay, then highlighting some bolts and details all around the model. Night Shift made this technique a little bit more popular, just highlighting every nut and bolt. The smaller the feature is, the brighter it should be. I use again acrylics from Ammo by MIG, and I follow this up with a pre-dusting effect, going back to Tamiya paint and spraying basically dirty thinner. I use Tamiya Buff as a base color, mixed in with some random, more or less random brown to get a little bit a bright earth tone laid down. I will build up on this later as soon as I have the diorama ready, or the vignette, so I can unify it a little bit. It's just a pre-dusting step, nothing too major yet. Important is everywhere where I intend to use oil paints later on, place footsteps, place dust or dirt deposits, I want to have a little bit a patch of this pre-dusting effect, so I have a bright canvas the effect can contrast on. This is how this looks so far. I think that's a good point to more or less start into the detailed weathering next episode. The exhaust was sprayed brown and dusted over with NATO black, again Tamiya paint. I want to build up on this. That's a little bit glossy right now, the exhaust. This will dry over time, a little bit much thinner going on. Okay, this is followed up by something you all know. That's the pin wash, a very important step in the whole process, but nothing too spectacular. I show this about every time. I use enamel odorless thinner from Ammo by MIG to pre-moisten the surface, makes it much more easy to pick up the paint again. And for a wash I use dark wash, Ammo by MIG again, and this is then cleaned up and followed up by Africa Core wash. That's a little bit a dark brown wash I usually like to do wood texture with, and that's already more or less a dirt or grime effect. Here I apply it in a much larger area, allowing much more spillage around the edge I would like to deal with in this case, and then blend it back in. The amount of enamel odorless thinner laid down to the surface before applying the wash is more or less responsible for how well this whole thing blends and picks back up into the brush. The capillary action will soak it back in when I unload the brush and come back to it, and you guys can pretty much see that there is a first staining effect going on. That's nothing major so far, very easy technique, keeping it simple for now. The complete weathering process with adding texture will follow up when the vehicle gets finished. For now, this is where I would like to end the weathering process for this video and have a look at the tracks and the vehicle itself, so we can wrap it up and pick it back up later from a more or less clean point. Okay, let's dive into the tracks. Okay, Revo Sys supplies us with some single link workable tracks, and they are transport tracks, Tiger I transport tracks. This is completely fine for when you go with the idea behind the kit, having an early Tiger tank prototype, or what if this design would have been issued instead of the Tiger how we know it. The problem with building the earlier prototype almost half a year before the Tiger showed up is effectively the pattern on the track. Tiger tank tracks on the right and VK36 tracks are almost identical when it comes to the inner profile. The outer profile has no indents on the VK. This can clearly be seen on pictures, and the profile is slightly undercut. This is not really visible here, but we have a lot of other tracks using the same profile. If you look at the running gear side by side with a Tiger tank, here the initial, the RFM one, when we remove the resin parts, the gray ones, we end up with the same drivetrain, aka the transport configuration. This means the design of the VK tracks or transport tracks are fully integrated in a normal combat track. Normal Tiger tank combat track is just a wider version of the transport track, and the transport track existed first. This becomes clearly obvious when we look at both vehicles side by side. The Tiger I, when it was the decision was made to go with the 8.8 instead of the 7.5, the whole chassis, the superstructure was wider, the weight increased, and they kept the drivetrain and increased the width of the track. But this is a topic I will dive deeper into when I convert RFMs Tunisian Initial here into the V1, the H1 V1, the first actual Tiger tank prototype. So if you are interested in the development history of the vehicle built in 1/35, please do leave me a subscription. On the VK3601 there is still a lot to do. We are still missing the windows. We have not yet talked about the turret and its intended fate and history, of course. It was supposed to carry a 7.5 centimeter gun. The idea was even continued, again looking into a build for the future. But for now it's time to wrap this up since my tow cables arrived and I would like to finish the RFM Tunisian Initial Abteilung 501 Africa Tiger in 2 weeks. Until then, see you guys, enjoy modeling, have a great time.